What's going on, everybody? Mortem here. This time bringing you an interesting development of sorts. So on Monday, Games Workshop as well as video game publisher SNEG unveiled their Warhammer Classics project, which is a new sort of label that they are putting out a bunch of old Warhammer 40k games under. Now, before we get too much farther into the video, I do actually need to inform you that I knew about this a little bit ahead of time. Like last Thursday or Friday, they reached out and asked if I was interested in taking a look at any of these games, and also let me know that this was about to happen on Monday. To that end, they actually wound up giving me codes for like roughly 12 of the 20 some odd games that were included in the Warhammer Classics label. That is how I'm bringing you some of the footage of these older titles for this video, just so you are aware. To kick that off, well, they've actually started by releasing 19 games onto Steam that were not previously available due to various reasons. Now, 12 of these are making their return to Steam. They were available at one point, no longer were. Now they've been brought back as of Monday. 7 of them are new releases on Steam in the sense that they had never been available on Steam previously. Those are Shadow of the Horned Rat, Chaos Gate, Warhammer Epic 40k Final Liberation, Warhammer 40k Rites of War, Warhammer Dark Omen, Warhammer 40k Fire Warrior, and Warhammer Mark of Chaos. Now the rest of the games are those other 12 that I've mentioned that have been restored to the storefront, and then there's actually a handful more that have been available but are now under this Warhammer Classics label. Now, I really wanted to cover this for a variety of different reasons. There are obviously a ton of games here. Yes, when I first started digging into Warhammer 40k was when I learned about Rogue Trader's impending release, or, newly announced at that time, and then I spent the lead up to its release kind of learning about the setting and the world and everything, or universe, I guess. But one of the things that I kind of learned in the process of that is that there were a lot of Warhammer 40k video games, tons of them, in fact. Many of them weren't considered all that great, to be honest, and then a lot more of them were just really hard to come by. For, as this video probably already made apparent, sometimes they were just not available on Steam. Other times, getting them and then getting them working was also a problem. And so, in theory, while a lot of these games probably still aren't going to wow you, they are nonetheless now preserved and more readily available for people to check out when they happen to go down the same type of rabbit hole I did in wanting to learn more about the franchise. And in general, good or bad, I do think things like this should be preserved, and it's great just, again, from that preservation standpoint. Now, I'll be honest, the pricing, a bit of a mixed bag. They are having a discount from the time they announced it up until next Monday, I believe, for pretty much all of these, so all of them are on slight launch discounts, but most of them are anywhere from $5 to about $30. Some of them are on bigger discounts, like Battlefleet Gothic Armada is about 90% off. You can pick that one up for $1. And while none of them are terribly expensive, I think one or two of them could probably stand to be a little cheaper given the age and everything, but that does kind of sort of bring me back to the point I actually wanted to make here, which is that one of the reasons some of these are still $10 despite their age and everything is down to SNEG themselves. So I have talked a little bit about SNEG here and there previously. They've been fixing up and re-releasing a ton of old games. Lately, they have been working on a bunch of old Dungeons & Dragons titles. I've covered a few of them. They brought Temple of Elemental Evil into Steam as well, actually. And not only that, but they did a ton of work in fixing it up and making it an actually pretty solid release of that game. However, it is still just a re-release. These are not remakes or remasters or anything like that, but what they're charging you for realistically is the work that SNEG did to get these things up to date and actually running on modern hardware without too much of a problem. Which, again, kind of leans into the game preservation side of it. They weren't just dropping them all on Steam, not really doing anything to make sure they actually run and moving on. They did actually put some work in here. All of that stuff aside, however, another aspect to all of this is just the incredibly wide variety of genres and everything at play here, as well as time periods and depictions, etc. Probably worth a mention, in fact, that almost all of these seem to have been given a little splash screen when you fire the game up, basically saying that these games games are very old and their lore is more than likely inconsistent, which is certainly something to know. Now, personally, I've only had the opportunity to try out a few of these for myself. I kind of jumped into the ones that grabbed my attention the most. One of those was Fire Warrior. Fire Warrior puts you in the role of the Tau, which are not super involved in a lot of the video games from what I've been able to tell. And so seeing this game, which was originally released in 2003, kind of put you in the role of one directly was interesting to me. And on top of all that, it's a bit of like an old school FPS. A boomer shooter, if you will, is what I've come to call them, but I am aware not everybody's in love with that name. I thought this one was interesting though because it sees you fighting the Imperium of Man rather than, playing as the Imperium of Man, which is certainly the more popular choice these days. I also took a quick look at Chaos Gate, mainly because I had played Chaos Gate Demon Hunters previously, and with this one being the original version, I was curious kind of what it had going on. And this is actually like an old turn-based tactics style game as well, originally released in 1998, however. And to be honest, kind of reminds me of Fallout Tactics, though that's a little silly given that Fallout Tactics released in 2001, a few years later. So it should probably be the inverse, I guess, is my point. Either way, though, this can see you doing things like messing around with vehicles, setting up your exact squad of Ultramarines as you face down a bunch of missions. And then another one I checked out was Space Hulk. So I was a little interested in Space Hulk because it is slightly newer than the previous ones I have just talked about. Space Hulk originally released in 2013, and then they made a second one, or a similar one I guess, called Space Hulk Ascension in 2015, both of which are based on a board game, which also puts you in little turn-based tactical battles against gene stealers in particular. But really, given all of the games that are now under this label and were recently returned to Steam, there's a ton of other games here you could dive into and potentially learn a little bit about the old, I would say, early forays of Warhammer 40k into, video games and things like that, because while we've got Rogue Trader and stuff these days, which are certainly higher budget, it's always really interesting to me to take looks back at, what came before, basically. And that's really kind of why I wanted to make this video, but I think you guys more than likely get the gist of it by now. Long story short, a bunch of old and previously, in some cases, unavailable titles have been returned to Steam and available for people to check out as you please. And while I doubt I'll make a video about any of them individually, I am interested in playing some of these in my own time. And to that end, if there are any of these games you've played for yourself and you'd want to recommend or anything like that, by all means, let me know down in the comment section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.